Привет, меня зовут Владимир Kuskov.
My name is Vladimir Kuskov, and I head the Anti-Malware Research Lab. In our expertise center, we research all kinds of different threats, from malware to sophisticated targeted attacks. Good question. We wrote an article recently about the SparkCat stealer. It's interesting because it's the first stealer discovered for iOS. The first large-scale stealer for iOS available in the App Store. And we found it using our own proprietary sandbox. Our team was studying malware samples on the Android Play Market that loaded code into memory dynamically. This action is considered relatively suspicious on Android, so they were monitoring it and found a whole bunch of apps, and they saw that they were also on the App Store. We started to investigate and discovered that the apps were unusual in that they contained a fairly large amount of code written, to our surprise, in Rust. Then the team found that it included a machine vision library that the Trojan used to collect photos from the device's gallery and to search for data that could be used to access crypto wallets. So we started looking further. If these apps were on Android, could they be on iOS too? And yeah, they were. Researching iOS apps is challenging in itself because it's not easy to access them for research. Plus, they were heavily obfuscated. Also, the very fact that someone could search photos from an iOS gallery and send the information somewhere else to attackers has never been encountered before. We talked about triangulation last year, but that was a sophisticated, targeted attack, and here we're talking about a mass threat. So we dug deeper, researched the issue, and wrote a post a few weeks ago. I can't remember off the top of my head. It was a whole group of apps, and they were actually real in a certain sense. I mean, they weren't just straight Trojans, all bad and nothing else. They had real functions, but they also had malicious code. The apps were different. Delivery services, editors, things like that. They were on Google Play, Play Store, and of course the App Store for iOS. These apps were missed during moderation, which is incredibly surprising for iOS, because it's rare that outright malicious apps reach users in the App Store. After publication, we also contacted Google and Apple to report our findings, and they removed the apps from the stores. In general, we develop a lot of our tech from scratch, if not all of it. Why? Well, firstly, because we're the first to do a lot of things. We couldn't have gotten the technology anywhere else, even if we wanted to. And if something already exists, we'll know how to do it better. Secondly, cybersecurity is a highly specialized and competitive field where people don't just share developments openly. It's often cheaper and more effective to develop something on your own, if you have a strong team, which we do at Kaspersky. Our technology is always a response to new threats, whether they've already appeared or we know from our expertise that they'll appear soon. It's pretty much always been like that. Way back in the day, there were malicious files, and that's it. There really weren't any other particular threats. Then attackers started to obfuscate them. They started to hide what they really were from detection, so it would be harder to spot them with scans. That's when emulative technologies started appearing, heuristic detection technologies. Then somewhere in the mid-2000s, the first technologies based on AI started appearing, followed by behavioral detection and lots of other solutions. Then cybercriminals started getting into fileless malware. So then the threat isn't from some file on the hard drive, but instead, it exists as a registry key or a WMI subscription or something like that. These threats are hard to detect because typical solutions designed to scan files are useless. There's nothing to scan because there's no file. So we developed a new technology to detect such threats. In fact, independent laboratory testing has shown that we're the best at this, the best at detecting such threats, and by a significant margin at that, because we had this technology first. New types of methods and attack techniques tend to come in waves. For example, around the same time, the first samples of UEFI malware started appearing. To put it simply, UEFI helps computers boot up on modern platforms. As soon as these samples started appearing, we realized this was only the start, and such threats would multiply as time went on. And that's exactly what happened. So we developed a technology to scan these memory areas, UEFI custom module storage, and find threats there. After a while, attackers started using legitimate drivers that are vulnerable to execute code and certain actions in the operating system's kernel mode, bypassing access restrictions between the kernel space and user space, which is the basic mechanism for limiting access to the operating system.
Бороться с такой атакой достаточно сложно, потому что
It's hard to combat these attacks because we can't rely on this basic access restriction, as in this case it essentially no longer exists. We have to handle self-protection for our product ourselves, and in such a way as to not disrupt the operating system's functionality in all its various versions for our users. This isn't easy, and as far as I know, very few vendors have the expertise and technology to develop this sort of protection, but we do. In the last few years, it's become increasingly popular with attackers to find different ways to bypass EDR solutions or disrupt how they work. Attackers use some pretty ingenious techniques. For example, they can block the sending of telemetry from an EDR solution on the firewall. Combating these techniques is hard because they're legitimate and often go beyond the usual field of vision that endpoint protection systems even pay attention to. But this is a big focus for us, and we already protect ourselves against hundreds of such techniques. Based on what pen test specialists are saying, our solution is much harder to bypass than other solutions on the market, which just proves how well we're doing our job. Threat intelligence is something you couldn't imagine modern cybersecurity without. It's everything we know about who, how, and in what ways attacks are carried out, and what techniques are used. We need to know all this to develop protection measures and to be able to plan other measures ensuring robust security. Without this knowledge, it'd be impossible to make anything new because it would be like poking around blind in the dark, not knowing where to go, what to do, and why. So threat intelligence is crucial in the world we live in today. You can't do anything without it. We supply threat intelligence solutions to organizations and also use them ourselves. And we have a whole lot of different sources of threat intelligence. We have our cloud-based Kaspersky security network, where users voluntarily send us anonymized information about threats. As we get this information from different parts of the world, we see what threats exist and where, in what countries, and how they work. We also have honeypots that help us get malware samples and see examples of attacks. We even have a bot farm where we run bot emulators connected to botnet command and control centers that imitate bots. We get commands from these botnets and study what they do. We collect, process, and aggregate all this in our own databases for our own use and for our TI solutions. We have a lot of different TI services based on what our customers need at different levels of maturity. For entry-level customers, we provide threat indicator feeds to help scan for threats in their networks, block them on firewalls, and so on. For more mature customers, we have cyber threat reports that describe the attacks we've analyzed in detail. We identify the threat actor or group who organized the attack, how they did it, and with what techniques. Our customers' SOC teams need this information to write threat detection rules and prioritize operations. You need to know where to start when you're writing threat detection rules. What's most urgent, so you need to write rules now, and what rules can be written later. We also have a cloud sandbox that lets you check what a potentially malicious file or link does. For customers who don't have the resources or expertise to do analysis themselves, they can quickly see if a file is malicious or not, and if it is malicious, what it would have done. We rolled out this tool pretty recently. We look at it as next-generation threat intelligence. Here's what makes it so unique and effective. Essentially, we provide our customers with the same unique capabilities for threat hunting and threat prioritization that we have ourselves. The ability to see which threats are top priority and most relevant to that individual customer. We give customers the option to choose the region they're interested in, or country or industry. For example, financial services, most relevant to that customer. They can also choose the platform they're concerned about in terms of threats, Windows or Linux, for instance, based on the MITRE ATT&CK framework. We show the specific techniques used by attackers in their chosen country, industry, and platform, which are used more than others and which are most relevant. We show which techniques are used most frequently. Soon we'll also show which vulnerabilities attackers exploit most often. We also show which threat actors are most active within the selected criteria. This helps give us high-level visibility into which threats are most relevant to that customer. And there's a specific benefit for SOC teams, too. We provide ready-made information about which techniques need to be covered most urgently by detection rules. Before we introduced this tool, the world looked a lot different for customers. They were left to read their way through threat threat reports themselves, and bear in mind that thousands of these are published every year, all very resource-intensive. But so now we provide a ready heat map of techniques. Customers can check it, choose what's relevant, and prioritize coverage with responsive instruments. We also provide examples of how the technique is applied. For example, the MITRE ATNCK framework has examples too, but they're described fairly generally, just statements that a certain actor uses a certain technique, etc. But we give specific examples down to the command lines that attackers use. This information is invaluable for writing rules, and we have it available thanks to our own knowledge and expansive expertise. We can safely say that no one else on the market offers a solution like this. We also give examples of our own rules. We show how it's possible to detect specific techniques in different ways. We provide examples of recommendations on how to identify a technique's associated risks as well. We show examples of malicious files that are common for specific techniques. In essence, we offer a one-stop shop with all the tools that third-line SOC analysts need to write their own threat detection rules and do it right. That's what makes what we offer unique, what gives it real value.